All right, so my sister and I today were talking about different types of narcissistic abuse. And she's familiar with this from previous relationships she had been in and stuff. And not calling anybody out in any of these or saying anything about anybody bad, but talking about it relatively to where people understand what psychological manipulation is really. So with narcissism, a lot of times in our life we have learned behaviors. And these learned behaviors are most times, often than not, narcissistic. And we were talking about covert narcissism today, and it's where they're kind of shady about doing it. They manipulate people against you, find a reason to be better than you, but it's covert, where they're starting to do all this shit against you and hopefully not get caught. So not only is there covert narcissism, but there's also other different types besides that. But narcissism in itself is basically psychological manipulation where somebody is exploiting you and alienating you, gaslighting you to make you feel bad, negative about yourself, manipulating the way you feel about yourself, talking down to you like a child, prizing themselves above you and not really respecting you many times often than not. So the truth is, it can be very sneaky, but the reality is a lot of people do it and they abuse their kids, they abuse their spouses and different things. But identifying this abuse helps us to get to a state of psychological homeostasis where we can level out and balance our lives. And that's not only good for a narcissist, but it's also good for victims. Not only victims, but like everybody else all around. So see, we shouldn't be exploiting one another. We should be building a life together, working together for needs and psychological comfort and overcoming problems versus feeding them and creating negativity and hatred and death. Because that's what you get by not choosing life-attaining and maintaining behaviors. But when we choose correct behaviors, which are life-attaining and life-maintaining behaviors, we have a reward and payout because we're using dignity, we're respecting one another, we're considering one another's feelings. Whereas psychological manipulation is nothing more or less than the want of sex or money. Most times, often than not, with most things with men, most things with women, the two motivational drivers and factors of them all, more than half the time, is just sex and money. And those are the two main things that anybody cares about, and the truth is that we don't think that way as women because we're more emotional creatures, but for most men, it's sex and money. Those are two motivational drivers and factors that most men by the age of 40 pursue. But that does not mean it's correct unless you can learn how to take care of your family and your wife or your spouse or your kids emotionally too. Because not only is there the physical things like food on the table and health, physically, there's also the emotional sentiment and the mentality you leave with your kids. So all the things that we choose not to fight as parents, our children have to fight for us. So we should choose that selectively by what we give them and what we choose to teach them ourselves. So we don't repeat narcissistic abuse. We choose correct behaviors and correct disciplines, high disciplines over any animosity and hatred. Anything like death and killing is not correct, but life-attaining and life-maintaining behaviors are. But it's when people choose life that they win. When people choose those godly standards and choose not to sin or practice sin, that we receive a perfect life, perfection with God, and finally the fulfillment that we deserve.